Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, let's get ready for some Warhammer. Today, I am bringing you my list preview for the final semifinals. Yes, that is the correct way. I practiced that. This is actually on the first take, too. Of the Tim's Nation tournament to crown the first tournament champion. Now, we have been talking about a lot of rules and how this is all going to pan out and stuff like that. And we'll detail all that after we crown the first champion. Right now, we need to determine who that is. And this matchup will be the DeathWatch and the Grey Knights. A matchup that Lane and myself have been wanting to do for a while, since Lane has been building towards this stronger, more powerful DeathWatch list. And the Grey Knights on the channel have remained undefeated. So this is actually a matchup that we have been waiting for a very, very long time. What will transpire from this, we'll figure that all out, and you can hear about that in the post-game, depending on who wins this. Because, as some of you may know, the Necrons defeated the Votann. So my Necrons will be going on to face the winner of this matchup, which theoretically means I could have two factions, two armies, fighting for the title. We'll discuss all that in a bit. But for right now, it is about the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights that we're bringing, and as we've seen in the last week, a lot of things are going to be changing here soon. Data sheets, cards, points, everything. It's going to be a totally different edition once the dust settles. So the Grey Knights that I'm playing now, this may be the last hurrah for them, as we see in the current edition. So, with that being said, this is the Grey Knights that I've brought many times, so we are going to make this a much faster version of the typical army videos, where I will show the army, say what I got, and we're going to talk more about the tactics and tech that I plan on bringing into Lane and his DeathWatch that we're going to be facing later on this week. All right, let's look at the list for the Grey Knights. All right, so friends of the channel will know this list, and please, there are many other videos covering this exact same Grey Knight list, as it has had very, very minor changes, only minor changes from the data sheet updates, where I switched out my librarian for a tech marine. So, this is it. This list has 3 Dread Knights, regular Dread Knights. All the Dread Knights and the Grandmasters are going to have side cannons and silencers. All my Dread Knights have hammers. So you have silencer, side cannon, hammer, Dread Knight, body. I like the Dread Knights because of their advance and charge. The fact that they can advance, charge, fall back, and still charge, and the auto advance 6 because of the Grey Knights detachment rules. These guys are awesome. 4 up invuln, 2 up save. They're tough, and with that side cannon being so getting that boost, they're much, much, much stronger than they were at the beginning of the edition. I will also have 2 Grandmaster Dreads. Now, one of my Grandmaster Dreads will have a hammer. He and the other one will have the sword. Now, the one with the sword has the sigil to bounce away. These guys, if you get into a monster or a vehicle into combat with these things, it is vicious. Reroll hits, reroll wounds, and reroll the damage result. So much damage. Otherwise, their stats are pretty much the same as the Dread Knights. They don't get the advance and charge feature. They can reduce the stratagem by 1 down to a minimal by 1 CP to a minimal of 1 CP. But it has to be battle tactic, so realistically, there isn't very much stratagems that these guys are going to have access to, but it is that monstrous creature hit and the fact that they can have enhancements. I have to double check, but I think I had to take Inescapable Wrath off my other Grandmaster, which was the one with the hammer, had Inescapable Wrath prior, but I got to double check and see. That was the +1 charge, just to be able to get that extra boost out of Deep Strike. Pretty sure I took that off of him for the points and some of the point increases, but I'll double check for the end of this video. Now, we still have the 10 Terminators and the 10 Purifiers. The 10 Terminators are going to be led by a Grandmaster. Now, I like the Terminators over the Paladins because of the Apothecary option, as well as the 3 OC value with the banner in the squad. Terminators have been so brutal for this edition, like just without a Grey Knights. Deep strike them down, pick them back up with the Mist of Deimos, and then rapid ingress right back in and hit again. These guys can bounce all over the field. Super, super resilient. with their 2-up, 4-up, especially, and the fact that they have 3 wounds, and the fact that I can put a model back while the Apothecary is alive. The Grandmaster allows them to do a once per game free battle tactic strat, which usually means that I can go devastating wounds into 1 turn with these guys, which is a nice factor to be able to use. That's one of the ones I typically go to. On the other side, we have 10 Purifiers, probably one of the best anti-infantry units in the game. These guys have the Incinerators as well as their Purifying Flame, and they will be led by Castle and Crow to get the boost to their Purifying Flame. These guys, the Overwatch on these guys is super, super deadly. And with the fix of a lot of stratagems to be able to be used out of the Teleport Strike or Deep Strike and other things like that, and as well as advancing, makes these guys very, very, very fast, very strong. They don't have the durability of the Terminators, but they still have a 2-up save. Things like True Silver Armor on these guys means that they're still very bulky to be very durable as compared to some Marine units. And last, we have a Tech Marine. The Tech Marine was the last add to this army. He can give me some repairs on the vehicles, give me +1 to hit on my Dread Knights. More or less, though, his job is going to be to get to hard to reach corners of the map and play the secondary game. He's relatively cheap and very good for that. But it is nice that he is able to boost the Dread Knights to be able to pack more of a punch and fix them, so if I get hit and not destroyed by just some stray fire, I can get some repairs on those guys relatively quickly. Another enhancement that I did not mention is the Grandmaster is also going to have First to the Fray. This has been super crucial. It was not something I was running at the beginning of the edition, and now I feel like it's almost an auto-include with my playstyle and most of my lists. First to the Fray allows me to Deep Strike on turn 1. So, turns that I go first, games I can go first, I could drop these guys in and have them on the field to start making plays, whether it's for secondaries, right off the rip. And as I mentioned, it's very easy to put these guys into a position where that Mista Deimos is difficult, if not unavoidable, for my opponent to trigger, to then pick them up and rapid ingress them for the next turn to be able to hit super hard and a charge into the next turn. There is a lot of versatility around these guys, and First to the Fray makes them that much faster. Okay, as I said, I did double check. Yes, I do have Inescapable Wrath on that Dread Knight, so there are 3 enhancements in this army. Inescapable Wrath on a Dread Knight Grandmaster with a hammer, the First to the Fray on a Grandmaster with the Terminators, and last, the Sigil, which is going to be on the Grandmaster Dread with the sword. The reason I do it that way is the sword has a sweep profile. It's not the best, but late into the game, when I need to clear infantry off objectives to be able to score objectives that may have a higher OC, I like having that sword available there. It can still hit hard. While it doesn't get the D6 +1 that the hammer gets, and it doesn't have that strong of a strength, I have 4 other options for the hammer. And one of the biggest things with the hammer, that's the biggest boost, which honestly I need a shirt that just has the stratagem for Tank Shock on it. Because Lane at this point, he'll even say it, like Tank Shock is basically like, it's my calling for 40k at this point. Every time I charge a unit, go, I'm going to Tank Shock with these. Like, can you? It's a vehicle. It is? Yes, it is. So Tank Shock has been one of my bread and butter and my babies. Just this last weekend, I used Tank Shock to help me pick up the Nightbringer with the Gorkanaut. Granted, strength 18 was pretty nice. Now, so 20 dice on that Tank Shock. Whew, love it. So Tank Shock off the Dread Knights is super strong. Most things in the game, it is going to have higher toughness than right away. I don't think there's really anything that doesn't come out of Forge World that isn't, that we see, and maybe even that case, not even competitively in that sense, that is going to be able to stop me from getting 16 dice when I swing through for that Tank Shock. And then you punch it, then you hit it. If it's a vehicle and you're hitting it with a Grandmaster, now it's just, you're just shredding that thing entirely, rerolling hits, wounds, and damage profile. Now it is once per turn. So your turn, my turn, I'm sorry, battle round. But honestly, I don't feel like you're going to need much more than that. Now, moving forward, I think the Grandmasters will still have a home in that nature, as we see a lot of stuff to go forward in vehicles. But that's all conversation for another video. Right now, Lane and I probably will be finishing up this entire tournament with the current cards as is, and then we will immediately start off with the next round and the next goings with all the new cards and all the new play. Just the way it's all going to time out, most likely. Now, for this matchup, Lane has devastating wounds for days, which means that my 2-up saves get are less valuable in the turn that he pops the Tome of Ectoclades. For those who don't know, the Tome of Ectoclades is a very, very strange relic, and it is strange in the sense that Marines had a change to Oath of Moments very early on in the edition, and this has been untouched. Since this is untouched, it's very powerful for the entire army. And this is why Lane has built his entire army focused around things that can do devastating wounds. The Tome of Ectoclades is an enhancement that reads, when you select an Oath of the Moment target, you may select a second one. For those targets, you may reroll hits and wounds. Because it includes the reroll hits and wounds as part of the enhancement, this is part of the enhancement, not the Oath of Moment. So Lane has full rerolls to hit and to wound once per game. So one turn, he can pick 2 units and have full rerolls to hit and wound. This is extremely strong when you pair it with devastating wound mechanics. Right now, Lane has been running the 30 Stern Guard. So he has 30 Stern Guard separated into 10-mans that are coming out of drop pods. This allows him to hit on turn 1 if he wants to pop Tome of Ectoclades on turn 1. For me, this means my Dread Knights are probably going to be a very, very hard target that are going to get hit quickly and very, very damaged. Now, he could go into my Terminators. He could push into my Terminators and try to pour fire into them to really just devastating wounds and sink them down. And that is a concern. But I feel like they're a little more difficult to get to. But I think that is going to be one of his primary try targets. So one thing I can do is not necessarily give him the Terminators in a perfect spot so that he is not able to just spray into him. If he's able to take if he picks 2 targets and just takes out the Terminators, that might be a win in his book, pushing forward into the later points of the game. So that one Tome of Ectoclades turn is going to be huge, and I'm going to need to be very patient with how I make my plays. In previous games, I was very aggressive with my Terminators. In this matchup, because of the drop pod assault, I may need to be a little more reserved and play off the backfield and kind of let him start making his plays. Especially if I can put him back a bit, where then if he does Tome of Ectoclades the Terminators or a Dread Knight or something in that matter, I have the ability to give this the lone op when I drop it in if I can push him into a backfield position. Now, it's not as defensive in that strat because I have to do it beforehand, but it's still available. True Silver Armor is going to still be decent with some of the AP ones that are coming across, but True Silver is not going to be as important because of the fact of how much devastating wounds are going to be coming through. Now, the positive is, when he beyond the devastating wounds, he's going to need 6s to even hurt me at all versus things like my Dread Knights and my Grandmaster. So this means that my command points for True Silver Armor probably not going to be using as much. So I can spend the command points on other things. So that's going to be another shift of mindset going into this matchup, is I don't need to necessarily have a command point hanging around for True Silver Armor, because if he wounds me on a 6, he's getting a devastating wound. So there's no stopping that, really. So it's going to be difficult for me to stop some of that damage output. However, the Purifiers, because of how many good targets I have moving across the board, it's going to be difficult for the Purifiers to become a top priority. And those Purifiers alone can start moving across the field and just absolutely shred infantry after infantry after infantry by shooting them in my turn, and then being in a position that if he tries to move a unit, I can overwatch it and rip it to shreds right there. It's a lot of strong firepower to be able to really start removing the Stern Guard. Aside from the Sturm Guard, we do possibly see, as we've seen last matchup, the Gladiator Reaper. Gladiator Reaper is one that will probably be able to utilize my True Silver against because of some of its guns. And it can really hurt the Purifiers in that sense. A lot of my other units, it's not going to be as strong into. Also, moving on through some of the things in Lane's list that I've seen in the past, he's also most likely going to be bringing that 6-man squad of Centurions that can just bounce around the field because he's DeathWatch. Those are scary. Those are super, super scary. They can bounce around and pick. I have 5 Dread Knights. The game's 5 turns. He can go turn 1 you, turn 2 you, and just pick them off easily. He also has the Eradicators, which the Eradicators reroll hits and wounds into these vehicles. I don't remember if it's on objective or not, but they still get those rerolls. So that's almost giving him a third target in this sense. Now, while the Eradicators are very squishy in comparison, especially with my side cannons and the heavy side cannon damage, they can still land and remove, land and remove. And that's going to be a lot of Lane's biggest plays, is the fact that he is going to be able to land and remove units. If in one turn, his Centurions pick up a Dread Knight, his Eradicators pick up a Dread Knight, his Stern Guard damage the holy heck out of some Terminators. We're looking, and then he still has other things to shoot with. He could maybe he almost picks up the Terminators or just completely beats them up to the point where they're too small of a squad to really do any damage. Now that puts me in a rough position. I'm down 2 Dread Knights, my Terminators, so I have 1 squad of Purifiers and 3 Dread Knights of some flavor. And getting those Dread Knights into position to be able to hammer back is going to be tough. Pun intended on the hammer factor. I can pick up, I can still move around the field, and I can still score those points. But getting them into those positions to not then take the weight of his army, because now, since he's past the Tome of Ectoclade's turn, he's not going to be as efficient with, like, the Eradicator is going to be slower. He could pick them up. The Centurions are going to be slower, but they have the range. He could pick them up as well. He has the Stern Guard, which are going to be moving out to take objectives and just kind of stand there. The Centurions and the Eradicators can get in a position to counter my Dread Knights and remove them, so that even though I may remove Stern Guards, now the Eradicators and Centurions go back, take the objectives, and hold them into the end of the game. So, how do we get past this? Well, for starters, not giving the Terminators away too early. In a lot, like I said in the beginning part of this, a lot of games I play very aggressive with the Terminators, pushing them out there early, making sure to have them get out there and force my opponent to Mistademos me out of the field and then rapid ingress back in. I will still be looking for that play. And if the cards tell me that's what I got to do, then that's what I got to do. And I will still be looking for that play because that's a very strong play. But with the drop pods, with the fact that they can drop in on turn 1 and need to protect from that, I need to make sure that when I put those Terminators down, there is not enough room or lanes for him to drop in and just put 30 Stern Guard into the Terminators, because that could be a big part of it to remove such a beefy brick early. On top of with all these things as well, I do have the Sigil, which means that I can move that guy a little more aggressively to play off objectives, to score secondaries on that Grandmaster early, so that if you get shot at, he bounces away. Now, Lane is seasoned with it to know, move close, charge, don't, shoot at him, maybe in those aspects. But if I can put him in a position where it's like, you're not going to get close enough to me to charge me, you can only shoot me. If you shoot me, I jump away. There's a lot playing into all of that. So those are 2 key elements with the Terminators, dropping them in a position where Lane cannot get enough firing lanes onto those units, and using the Grandmaster with the Sigil to start playing those missions early. Now, in all honesty, if I end up going second, this is strongly a huge benefit, because then the Dread Knights that I place on the table, I can then pick up, and I can have a much stronger aggressive stand to be able to hit and do damage to things that are on the table early. one of the big ones, by spending a single command point, I can land within 3 inches with something and hammer the Centurions early. If I can get enough damage on those Centurions early and whittle them down, it's going to make it more and more difficult for them to take out my Dread Knights, especially on the factor that I have 4-up invulns. So when you get 2 wounds on me, 50% odds, okay, I stop one of them, you don't take out the Dread Knight. Now, we all know dice. This is a dice game, which means that I could just roll 4-ups for days and never have a piece of damage go through. But it's a lot harder to roll nothing but 4-ups when you're making, 7, 8 of them in a row, where the Centurions 6 shots just off their las cannons, because it's 6 man. But when I can get that down to 2 or 3 guys, now he has to hit first. Okay, Oath of Moments. Maybe I'm on an objective. Then he's got a wound. Wounding on 3s. Okay, still a possibility there. And then I get that 4-up save. So now, if there's only 3 las cannons shooting at me, they are twin linked, so they do reroll the failed wounds. And if I'm on an objective, they're rerolling the hits, because that's what Centurions do. So it's very likely that hitting and wounding column, but it's still dice. 3 shots, and if one of those doesn't get through all the way through that succession, and now we only have 2, cool, I just need to stop 1. So that's going to be pretty much my game plan going into this into a nutshell. Is I'm not able to just swarm the field and cover the field fast. I need to make Lane make his play before I can really start pushing out. Because of the speed of the Dread Knights with the advance and charges and stuff like that, I am able to hit later on with those guys, and they still hit super, super strong. A lot of those guys are able to be able to pick up things like the Stern Guard very quickly. The Eradicators, those are going to be things I'm able to pick up very quickly, because every hit from the Psy Cannon is a dead Eradicator. The Centurions are going to be ones that are going to need some time. 4 wounds apiece, toughness 7, they're tough. But if I can at least just whittle them down, that will be huge. Now, the other positive thing is they are infantry. And since they are infantry, if my Purifiers can land there and get in position, that's a lot of damage I can put onto him. Now, he can Armor Contempt and ignore my AP1. So he's going to be on 2-ups. But I'm going to make him roll a whole heck of a lot of dice when he does that. Because that Purifying Flame is anti-infantry 2-up. And that is something I'm betting those Centurions are not going to look forward to getting hit by. And then you want to try and move away. Well, I guess they pick up and fly away. You don't have to do that. But stay near me. But still, there's a lot with that I can play off of too. This is going to be a tight game. This is going to be a tough game. These are armies that Lane and myself are very, very seasoned with. These are armies that Lane and myself would take to high-ranking GTs in hopes to win the whole thing. So this is going to be a tight matchup no matter what. Things I'm hoping for. 1, I am definitely hoping to go second. Always a positive with playing Grey Knights. Number 2, I'm hoping that my secondary draws do not get too aggressive too early. So I'm able to place my Terminators and play more in the backfield on that and make it very difficult for Lane to hit the targets he wants to hit and give him targets that I want him to hit, and push him into those later turns and be able to get an opportunity to hit the Centurions early. Any opportunity, any chance I can get where those Centurions are there on a position where I can hit them is going to be hugely satisfactory. Using the Sigil, I can maybe hopefully bait them out where they're in a position where they have to just shoot at him to get him to use the Sigil just so it's burnt to not think about it for the rest of the game. And that is definitely something that a lot of players into Grey Knights do as well. And I do know it's a valid play. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it is definitely important to be able to just, that Sigil exists. Okay, I'm going to shoot you. Now you don't have it anymore. So that's the list. That's the tactics. That's the play. There's only one thing left to do, and that's play the game. And we're going to be getting to that very soon. Stay tuned. Lane's video on his army and his DeathWatch and what we've seen here. And as always, like, share, subscribe, turn on the bell and get notified so you can see when this matchup goes live. All right, everybody. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.